everyone, my name is Gil, and I'm excited to be back with you as we begin our series, The Making of. So last night, my wife, Ellie, and I were watching one of our favorite TV shows. We watch it every single week, and at the beginning of the show, it said basically like, stick around after the credits for some bonus content. So like we watch the show and we listen, here's the thing. The show is not the easiest to follow or understand, and I'm not really the smartest guy. It's really very often that I will watch an episode of the show and immediately search on the internet or Twitter or whatever and be like, what just happened in the show? So anyway, the credits roll and the bonus content pops up, and sure enough, it's like the director of the show explaining everything that just happened in the episode. Why the characters were acting the way that they did, why he chose to shoot that final scene on that certain location, why the main character didn't choose to do the one thing and why he chose to do the other thing. It completely opened up my eyes to the whole episode and the show. It made me think about the show in a whole different light. Maybe you've seen a behind the scenes feature sort of thing like that, watched a movie director in action. Directors, they call the shots. They help everyone know what to do. They know the script better than anyone. They know how all the lights need to be set up, where the actors should stand, what they should do, and they help everyone on the set get oriented to their vision for the scene. Here's the deal. We are in a series now called The Making of. And the idea is this: when we decide to follow Jesus, when we put our trust in him, we put our trust in an incredible director who wants to help us become the versions of ourselves he's always envisioned. Every movie has a director who helps shape the vision as it moves from words on a page to something that we experience. And every one of us has a God who has a purpose and a vision for our lives, and he's inviting you and me to partner with him in becoming more and more like Jesus. So what does saying yes and allowing Jesus to direct our lives look like? Well, this week we're gonna hear the story of Moses after he came down the mountain after spending time hearing directly from God. This story teaches us how spending time with God can make us more like Jesus. Check out what Exodus 34 says. It says, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. And when Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, so Aaron and the leaders of the community came back to him, and he spoke to them. Here we see Moses returning from Mount Sinai and talking with God, and after Moses spent time getting guidance from God, he walked back down the mountain to share it. And when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he didn't even realize that he was glowing, he was radiating. So here's what's happening. Moses comes down from the mountain after meeting with God and receiving God's commandments for his people, but it's really clear that Moses is not the same guy that he was when he went up the mountain. He's different. It says his face was radiant, like it was shining and glowing, reflecting God's light and his glory. Something was different about Moses after he had been in God's presence. When we spend time with God, we too can leave glowing, just like Moses, radiating joy and peace and hope. We can listen to God's direction in our lives anytime and anywhere. And spending time with God can make us more like Jesus. And here's the deal: God wants to spend time with you. You are exactly the kind of person that God wants to be with, to spend his time with, that he delights in and cares about and wants to call to something amazing. You're not just a project that God is working on, you are his beloved child, and he's got a vision for your life that's better than anything we could come up with on our own. And my friends, as you spend time with God, your life, just like Moses, will begin to transform, to radiate and reflect the good things of God: peace and joy, hope and kindness and gentleness. In the book of Acts, chapter 4, we see Peter and John radiating with God's presence in front of a crowd of people. And it says in Acts 4, it says this: when they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized that these were unschooled, ordinary men, and they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Do you have the kind of relationship with God where people can tell that you've been with him? The best disciples of Jesus, the people I know who are better at following Jesus than me, they have a non-anxious presence. They're not hurried or reactive. They're at peace. They know who they're created to be and how their life fits within God's plan to change the world. So, what does it look like to spend time in God's presence? In Romans 12, the Apostle Paul highlights one of the keys to following Jesus, and he says, "Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble, and keep on praying." Rejoice in our confident hope, be patient in trouble, and keep on praying. We can choose to be faithful in our prayer. As we talk to God and carve out time to listen, we can be guided, encouraged, and helped by God. We can spend more and more time with God, and we'll continually become more of who we're meant to be. We don't have to have it all together to talk to God. God wants to meet us right where we are. We simply need to invite God into our day-to-day journey and trust each step of the way. God will make us into who we're meant to be because spending time with God can make us more like Jesus. Now, it's important to understand, not every moment you have when you're spending time with God will leave you feeling glowing and radiant, full of energy and excitement. You might be challenged, corrected, or invited to do something hard, or disappointed even by an answer that you get in your prayers with God. Even Moses himself experienced this. In fact, this wasn't the first time that Moses came down from the mountain. In Exodus 32, Moses comes down from the mountain with 2 tablets of God's commandments in his hands, and he goes to share them with the people, and he sees them worshiping other gods immediately. What he expected that God was going to do through him right away didn't happen. And instead, he was met with challenges. So we see Moses literally smashing the tablets on the ground in anger before he goes back up the mountain. But over time, Moses became more like Jesus. He developed a concern and a care for others, even when they were disobedient. And he rises back up the mountain to meet with God once again, pursue God's vision for his life. And over time, it grew him into a person that he was made to be. To be honest, you guys, spending time with God, it looks different for everybody. When we're prioritizing spending time with God to be made more like Jesus, we need different ways to help us shine a light on what God is doing to direct our lives in the right direction. So here's a few questions maybe you can ask yourself, and maybe they can help you discover different ways to connect with God this week. The first one is this: what is your schedule like? Think through your schedule, your week, your day. How can you create pockets of time to connect with God in new ways this week? Often when we feel like we don't have time, it's a good sign, a good reminder that we need to take another look to make time just to be with God, even if it's sitting in God's presence for 10 minutes in silence before the day even begins. Second question is this: what brings you joy? What are the passions God has given you? Do you love music or running or just being outdoors? Those are pathways. Those are ways you can connect with God, with your mind, your body, your heart, and your soul every single day. Begin to notice what those things are for you this week and today, and talk to God about them. Invite him into those things that bring you joy. Finally, how does God help you glow and shine and radiate his presence in the world? Maybe you need to think creatively about how your passions and your joys can be spaces for you to meet with God, to become more like Jesus. God simply wants to spend time with us, and as we do, we will be transformed because spending time with God can make us more like Jesus. When we do these things, we allow God to direct our lives and find freedom in the path that he has for all of us.